So I was lucky enough to be invited to the European premiere for Venom the Last Dance, which was just as spectacular as it sounds. Now, I do hear the criticism that everybody is saying with this film, firstly in terms of it being really convoluted, secondly in terms of it not really being able to realize its potential, and ultimately just feeling like it could have and should have just been so much more epic, especially with the post-credit scene in Venom 2, setting up a potential rivalry and battle between Venom and Spider-Man. And then it was kind of weird, wasn't it, in No Way Home, where Venom kind of popped into the MCU and then just as quickly popped back into the Sony Spider-Man universe. Apparently he was going to be part of the epic battle with Doc Ock, Sandman, Green Goblin, and of course Electro, but then they ultimately decided not to have Venom in there as they wanted to do a proper Sinister Six in the future. However, coming back to Venom the Last Dance, I do definitely think that there is enjoyment to be had in this movie, especially with the relationship between Eddie Brock and the zany Venom. Now, of course, Venom is a really deadly character in this movie, in the comic books, but I do love how they gave him a little bit of a funny personality, and the symbiote is never really taking over Eddie Brock. If anything, they are kind of a partnership from the beginning, and like with any partnership, of course, they're going to have the ups and downs, but I do feel like ultimately this relationship is definitely one of the film's strongest aspects. And surprisingly, they've only really been together in terms of the movie timeline for a year. And speaking of the second film, Venom Let There Be Carnage, of course, in that film, Patrick Mulligan was killed, and now in this film, Eddie Brock is being blamed for it, setting up the stakes of this movie in terms of having Eddie and Venom having to run around and trying to clear their name. And then we kind of have multiple levels of villains. So for example, we have Knull right in the background, and you can definitely tell that they are following the Thanos blueprint in terms of having a big bad villain right in the background. And speaking of Thanos, I thought it was really funny right in the beginning of this movie where Eddie Brock is making fun of Thanos and all of his jewels, and of course the multiverse, which Ryan Reynolds also very similarly did in Deadpool and Wolverine. And if Knull is sitting in the background, he is sending his Xenophages to do his dirty work to retrieve the codex, which only Venom and Eddie currently have, as this has been triggered from the death of Eddie, but then Venom using his symbiote abilities to bring him back to life. I think this is also a bit of a clever way to make sure that Venom is not in full force the whole time, which of course will save them a lot from a budget perspective. But when you do see Venom in full force, I think he is absolutely brilliant. And in turn, this really allows Tom Hardy to be front and center of this movie, and I do actually think he does a really good job. I mean, on paper, you could see this role as being a really funny, easy role to play, but I do actually think it's quite complex in terms of trying to make sure the audience really does believe that Venom is this other character within him. When he's using his tentacles to do all of this crazy stuff, just seeing Tom Hardy's reaction to this, I do actually think was pretty impressive. The one thing that I don't think is that impressive is just forcing in this kumbaya family that is just teaching Eddie Brock certain lessons, as I do definitely think that they dragged this movie down so much. And I'm really surprised that Sony even did this, as the backlash from the Justice League of having this family being forced in there that you don't really care about did not work at all, and it does kind of feel like a bit of a copy-paste here. I feel like the Xenophages are nowhere near as cool as the symbiotes, and maybe Knull did this on purpose as he realizes that symbiotes have got a bit of a mind of their own, whereas Xenophages are very deadly and will just literally do whatever Knull wants them to do. Of course, hiring Rhys, Ifans, and Chiwetel Ejiofor, who both have played other Marvel characters in the past, for example Dr. Connors and Mordo. Apparently this was all done on purpose to show that the multiverse has got very different actors playing very different roles. I think all of the Area 51 characters were pretty well developed, and I think if they had stripped out all of the scenes with this random family, they could have really built up the Area 51 characters, especially Rex Strickland and Teddy Payne, as they had the potential to be really cool, complex characters, especially Strickland. I feel like characters like Strickland in other properties, you can really feel the pain of why this character just wants to defeat the hero, as you can literally see things from this character's perspective. However, in this movie, because of the fact that they weren't able to develop this character that much, when he just switches onto the good side, it just has no impact. But I do think that the ending was actually really good. First of all, seeing all of the symbiotes fighting, I feel like that scene alone was just absolutely extraordinary. And then from an emotional perspective, when you see Venom sacrificing himself to not only save Eddie, but basically save the whole of humanity as well as keeping Knull in check as well, was incredibly heartbreaking, especially when Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock is reaching out to Venom and he is thinking that he is once again going to bond with him, but ultimately Venom is actually just preventing Eddie from getting hurt from all of the explosions that are just about to take place. Like I said, was so emotional. And Sony tried to do a very similar thing to what Ryan Reynolds did in terms of the ending, having a bit of a flashback to all of the bloopers across the Fox X-Men era. This time they were flashing back to all of Venom and Eddie's sequences, while Eddie Brock was going to New York City and seeing the Statue of Liberty, which was always Venom's dream. So I do actually think it was pretty emotional. Now we have two post-credit scenes. One of them is showing that Knull is still going to continue his vengeance plan of wanting to take over all of the symbiotes in the entire universe. And then we also see another one where you got to see the tube that did originally contain a little bit of Venom symbiote now being cracked open. So maybe Venom dropped his symbiotes all over the different places that Venom and Eddie have visited over the last 3 movies. So maybe all of this is going to rebond, and then with the Venom hive mind, he is going to remember everything. So this could be how we get Eddie Brock to return back to playing Venom again. And maybe this is how we get to see Spider-Man versus Venom in the future. We also got to see Juno Temple's Pain character now continuing the symbiote storyline, and now also has an additional lightning power, which has now been unlocked thanks to the symbiote. So I think this character could be really interesting in the future, especially if you don't know if she's going to go down the good side or the evil side. So whilst Venom the Last Dance definitely wasn't a perfect movie, like I said right in the beginning, I do think that there is enjoyment to be had. And if you're one of those people that really loved comic book movies the way that they used to be back in the 90s, then I think you're actually going to enjoy this movie quite a lot. And so for all of those reasons, I'm going to give Venom the Last Dance a solid 5 out of 10. Now I'd love to hear from you. What did you think of this film? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.